let me start. And Dave, I'm going to age you just a little bit more. I know you remember when we met. It was about 18 years ago at an event at the Aspen Institute that Strategian put on for a week, when you got
Yeah,
indoctrinated into the ODI philosophy, if you will.
I did. I was CEO of, at the time, CEO of Blue Spring Software in Cincinnati, and we were a process automation software package. When I got introduced to you and I saw the ODI process, I had visions of being able to automate that and deliver it a little bit more effectively, but never quite got there.
Well, you've done a lot of other things instead, which is why we're here to talk about it. Because we've seen ODI applied in so many different ways over the years. We've worked
Mhm.
across many industries. We've seen lots of different applications, but yours is really a unique application, and and that's what we're here to talk about today. How you applied it, and what the result was as well. So I thought maybe we could start. Let the audience in on your journey through your time at RSM, especially.
Yep.
As John said, you grew that practice from 20 million to 550 million in about 11 years. That was pretty amazing. And I was hoping you could just take the audience through that story.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously when I kind of drank the Kool-Aid in Aspen and ODI has been kind of in the back of my mind as it relates to how I go to market, across the board ever since. And my journey at RSM started actually about 4 years before I joined the firm in 2013. I was leading a private equity and value creation program for an SAP reseller, a global SAP reseller, and I partnered with firms like RSM and to deliver, because private equity firms didn't like to talk to software guys back then, so they'd rather talk to an advisor. So I partnered with RSM and EY and a few others, and built out a pretty interesting practice around how to stand up a carve out on an SAP platform without breaking the bank to do it. But what I learned as I partnered with RSM is, they had a tremendous brand equity in the middle market and in private equity. They had built their model really around a very solid transaction advisory practice, quality of earnings and tax due diligence type work. And they had also had a tremendous consulting organization that was very under leveraged as it relates to serving private equity. So the building blocks were all there. And really what I did to kind of bring things into a better light as it relates to how we went to market and how we drove outcomes for our clients is to take a more value based approach to that client service model, leveraging ODI right out of the gate to just take the time to understand what the outcomes our private equity clients were trying to strive for at various stages in the life cycle, and getting our people to think in terms of the value that they were creating with the services they provided versus just the services themselves.
So in essence, you understood the job that the PE firms were trying to get done, and you
Yeah.
put together an offering that helped get the entire job done, is the way I understand it, right? You've talked to me before about your M&A 360 framework, which was based on ODI principles. Could you
Yeah.
explain what that was, how it evolved?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the evolution when I got there, like I said, all the assets were there. The first task was to get the firm, and again, there was at the time a 90+ year old firm, largely audit, tax, and consulting, and a lot of very talented people, a lot of talented technicians, but they thought about things in terms of what they did, in kind of an inside out approach versus an outcome driven approach, and I started just by getting them to think about, what the value of the services they provide was really creating for the client in the client's terms, not in ours, right?
Yeah.
That took a bit of time, and then the articulation, as you said, was put that into a framework that we trademarked, actually called M&A 360. That was a value creation framework that kind of laid out who could impact the value of an asset throughout the life cycle of an investment. And as opposed to going in and talking to a client about products and services and audits and tax returns and that kind of thing, we went and talked to them about real tangible outcome. How can we increase a portfolio company's EBITDA performance, increase enterprise value, exit value of the asset? How did that translate into internal rate of return for the fund? I mean, all terms that they could easily understand and consume. And then the question always would come back, so, well, how the heck do you do that? And then we could start talking about products and services, right? So we put it in a
Yeah.
context that they could more easily understand and consume.
So as you were talking about that, you said, grow the value of the asset over time, right? Was that how you viewed? Is that the job the PE firm is trying to get done?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the good news and the bad news about PE is they're incredibly what's the right word? They're demanding. They're a very intellectual group, right? So you got to kind of be on point. Um, but their investment thesis is right out on their sleeve, right? I mean, they need to articulate how they're going to create value, throughout the life cycle in order to attract and retain, their limited partners, the people that are investing in their funds. And so
Yeah.
we could pretty easily, figure out how they were doing it. Now, depending on the fund, obviously there's different investment thesis for different funds with different
Yeah.
different demographics. But the lion's share is, hey, they buy an asset, they do something really cool to it to make it more valuable, and then they sell it and return the returns to their LPs.
When I looked over your M&A 360 framework, it quite literally looked like a job map based on what the PE firm was trying to do, to
Yeah,
grow the value of the asset over time.
yeah,
And it sounds like you went from the very beginning, from acquisition or maybe even pre-acquisition, to the post-sale.
yeah. It was a job map. It really was. It did lay out what the job was that the PE firms were trying to get done in that that hold cycle, that 3, 5, 7 years that they were holding on to the asset. And again, tried to connect the dots between the work that we did and the value that could actually create at those various stages. And the whole design of it was to really get ourselves onto a kind of a reasonably intelligent peer-to-peer conversation with a very sophisticated buyer.
So you could talk to the PE firm leadership, and they would understand that you could help them get the entire job done.
Yeah, yeah, and we talked to them in their language, not ours. We didn't talk to them
Yeah.
about ERP and CRM and and
Yeah. Right.
regulatory taxes. We talked to them about EBITDA, enterprise value, that kind of thing.
Things they could relate to. Right.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges you faced was getting the teams to shift their technical mindset to become outcome focused. How did you overcome that obstacle?
Yeah, that was really the biggest thing, because if you think about and I know you've experienced this as well. If you think about the kind of the underlying notion that ODI promotes around being an outcome driven outside in, getting the job done, that all makes total sense, right? And it's almost common sense as it relates to what I was doing. But the practical execution of that model with a firm like RSM, and even some firms I'm working with now. I've retired from RSM. I'm doing some independent work, and you know these firms are made up of people that were trained to do something and went to school to do something. They were hired to do something. They're organized around that something and compensated around it. And we come in and tell them that well, that something that you do doesn't really matter what to the client. What matters is the outcome that something drives for them. And if you can't talk to them about the tangible outcome, the actual product or service really doesn't matter. Yeah.
Did you change the way they were compensated as a result, so they were more outcome driven?
Well, it I guess in a roundabout way, yes. I mean, they were more effective at the job that they were doing. We were able to grow the practice significantly, and I think
Yeah.
people were rewarded for that. But we never got to a point where we were actually basing compensation on an outcome-driven approach. But the implementation of that was difficult, because we asked teams of people to sit down and say, okay, you did this big project, and the client spent $5 million on it. What the heck did they get at the end of the day? How did we impact performance? How did we impact value in tangible ways? There's only 3 ways to measure value. I've said this my whole career, and I'm still waiting for somebody to give me the fourth. But it's either money, time, or risk, right? I mean, can you help me make more, spend less, right? Can you help me get things done quicker? And that's super important in private equity. Is internal rate of return is a big part of the value measure for those guys, right? And can you help me do it in a way that helps me, kind of identify and mitigate risk in the process, whether it's in the deal or whether it's in the exit or whether it's in the competitive landscape. But if you can help me see around the corner there, you can drive some significant value that we can put a dollar figure on. So
Yeah.
that's what we did.
So as you began to scale, because you went from 20 million to 550, how did you do that? What was your scaling technique?
Well, it was interesting because it was kind of an iterative approach. But what we ended up doing was putting together a very proactive strategic account process that put teams around the largest clients, probably the top 100 or so private equity firms that we serve, and these teams would proactively collaborate around ways that we think we could drive value and brought insights, perspective, thought leadership to the table that was relevant for their client, right? And whether that meant it led to a service offering or a product or a deal for us, it didn't really matter. The whole notion was let's lean in and show them how that we know how we can help you create value either at an industry or a functional level, and if that means work for us, and then that's great. And so that coverage model allowed us to really build, again, a trusted advisor relationship with some of the largest private equity firms in the country.
And they trusted you to get more and more of the private equity job done. I would
Yeah,
imagine that's how it worked, right?
yeah, that's how it worked. I mean, we just, we demonstrated that we understood what they did from their perspective and not from ours, and we understood how to connect the dots between the services we provided and the value outcomes that those services drove.
Yeah,
And what I learned over the years is that if we didn't tell them, what value we drove, they didn't know, right?
yeah.
And so they just thought hey, I just spent $1 million on something, but I guess I got it done. We had to show them why that $1 million created, 5, 7, 10 million in return.
Yeah. Well, in your experience, what are the core challenges that PE firms face in generating alpha with their typical 3 to 7 year investment horizon?
Well, I guess the first thing in the current environment, the 3 to 7 year investment horizon is 5 to 9, and that has an impact on IRR for sure. But I think generally speaking, market conditions, interest rates, things like that are always a challenge. Probably one of the biggest issues that PE firms face across the board is just sourcing. How do they identify and compete for for businesses that are for sale? But that's all more on the kind of the deal and the PE operating side of the house. From our perspective and my perspective, it was really around how do you really execute an investment thesis in a way that either meets or exceeds what's in there, right? So and this is where I think ODI can really come in and add some interesting thought concepts and ideas around where they could find new ways to generate alpha, whether that's in terms of money, time, or risk. And I just think there's a real opportunity there for them.
So what you're saying there is, once the transaction's taken place, the organization could use ODI to figure out how to grow from the core, basically, in the most efficient manner, and
Yeah.
that could generate alpha.
Yeah.
Uh, well, it's interesting because why wait until post-transaction? I know you had some
Yeah.
interesting thinking about how ODI could be used even upfront in the due diligence process. Could you share how PE firms could use ODI to
Yeah.
identify hidden opportunities and address them there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's only so much information that they can glean from,
Yeah.
the sim or the management deck or the documentation the iBankers are providing them and their own internal insights. And I think that and this is theory. I haven't done this in practice, Tony, as you know, but I believe that man, you could really drive some interesting outcomes by just looking at, a customer job and how that could impact, what their customers are really paying for and what their products are really doing and where there might be adjacent markets, that they could serve. And there's two. It's during diligence. There's a couple of ways that this is beneficial for the private equity firm, right? It can either help them be more competitive in the bidding process, meaning if they found a secret sauce that could provide an additional, impact point either on revenue and EBITDA, that could influence the investment committee to say, we can stretch this thing a little bit and we can still make it work if that's real. And so they could be more competitive there, or they could also identify post-close opportunities that they could leverage early in the investment cycle, as to allow them to take the benefit of the exit value or the enterprise value that would create over time.
Right. And then, of course, post-transaction, they could just execute on the growth strategy.
Exactly right. And again, every in my again in my experience, use if you take the time to really look at things from the outside in and look at things from the same way your customers looking at it, like you do every day, it really does change the game, and it changes the outcomes, and it really does have an impact on a measurable impact and sustainable impact on the value of the business.
Well, it just occurred to me too, the company itself that's being acquired could certainly benefit from this same exercise. So let's say that, because I remember, we worked with OnTrack a number of years back, and they eventually got sold to Kroll. It wasn't private equity, but it was a company, and they used ODI to lay out their roadmap to show how they were going to enhance the value of their investment over time as well.
Yeah.
Have you given that any thought? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, certainly doing jobs analysis or kind of like a voice of the customer type of thing to give you a sharper, product focus or a better product mix, or, things that can help you stimulate the marketplace. You could sit here and focus on, needs prioritization, to help drive, better innovation or faster growth. I mean, there's just so many ways you can use this tool. And with private equity, the key though is, as you and I have talked, it's got to happen early and it's got to happen fast, So I think a lot of the things that Strategy has done over the years to streamline the amount of time it takes to get to some of these ideas and some of these perspectives is really beneficial for PE, because it gives them enough time to leverage it, in a way that allows them to really impact the value long term.
Yeah, that makes sense, because they could use it immediately, use the output of an ODI engagement for sales enablement, for example, or then maybe for marketing, value proposition development, pipeline prioritization, all before they get into actual product and development, which takes a bit longer.
Exactly, and I think that was the big aha for me when I started down this path, is that none of this was really product related at all. This was all about how do we position, how do we package, how do we go to market, how do we sell, and not at all about how did we create or deliver products. Those were static. This was how do you put them together in a way and kind of feed it back to the client in a more articulate and consumable fashion.
Yeah, makes great sense, man. That's amazing. For our audience today, what would you say are the key lessons learned from your experience in applying the ODI principles to create value in the PE space?
Yeah, I will tell you, my lessons learned is this is hard work, right? I mean, the concepts are, I like to say strategy is easy and execution is really, really difficult. But from an internal perspective, to get, a technician, a professional, right? Service provider, whatever you want to call them. I don't care if they're a tax guy or an audit guy or a management consultant. They all did something, and to get them to take the time, or to figure out whether they had the right level of business acumen to convert their work into business value, that was really, really hard to do. Number one, and so on the internal side. On the client service side, getting private equity firms to appreciate and agree to be served in this fashion was a challenge as well, because they're like any other very sophisticated buyer. They know how to beat you up for $1. They know how to wring hours out of a project. They know how to hold you hostage for whatever, and that's all part of the game, right? But to really partner with somebody that gets it at the same level they get it, that was a steep transition as well. And so it didn't work everywhere. Some people just wanted to be procurement guys, right? And not, strategic partners with a firm that can help them drive an outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that would change over time, given there is a better approach?
I think it already has. I mean, the fact that when I started at RSM, I was kind of a one-man band. I was out there doing this all on my own. And I could only serve so many firms, and there was, maybe a half a dozen that I probably served well at that time. And that's probably debatable as well, as how well I served them. But and when I left, I mean, I think I had 17 or 18. We called them enterprise account leaders, or guys that served a small number of very strategic private equity clients, and we were covering I'd say 90, 80, somewhere between 85 and 100 of the top private equity firms in that fashion. So they were, yeah, they saw the value, and they saw a reason to partner with us in a different way, right? And
Yeah.
I think it can happen, but it didn't. Like I said, it took 11 years. It didn't happen over time, overnight. You have to build the trust, and you have to have a quality deliverable. You have to be able to, to deliver, because in private equity, you're only as good as your last deal. And once you get into the penalty box, it ain't easy to get out.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I know John's going to come on back on board and handle some Q&A.
That's right. Thank you. That was uh, a brilliant masterclass interview there, Dave. Thank you for that. I've learned more than I thought I would, about your industry, and really just another example of how understanding your outcomes, leveraging ODI really drives growth for organizations, and how that has just been shown optimal methodology. So for you in the audience, this is your opportunity now to engage with both Dave and Tony. So if you have any specific questions, I encourage you to drop them in the chat. I'm going to do a short plug. If you're interested in ODI and applying it in your organization, if you go to stratagen.com/Tony, this will put time on Tony's calendar. He doesn't like when I. This is Tony's calendar. This will link you to his calendar. So if you are interested in learning how to apply ODI in your organization, go ahead and do that. And then to kick off the questions, here's Dave, if you were, let's say you just got a large funding round from a PE firm, and you were looking to grow into new markets, and you're starting from scratch, where do you start? What's the first step that you're taking? You've just got this influx of, let's say, Series A funding, uh, new markets, from, you built a core that impressed some investors. You got a fresh seed of investment. What do you do next?
Well, I guess that's a great question. I may just run. I don't know. But no, I mean, I think, look, I mean, I'd use the same approach. I mean, I'd look at the core customer that I'm aiming to serve, and I'd figure out how can I position the products that I have in a way that has a meaningful impact on their business, and talk to them in that regard. And then I think I'd also look at, and I think ODI is a great framework for doing this. What are adjacent markets or adjacent products or services that I could bolt on, right, to enhance that value proposition and have a broader, more holistic, kind of impact on that client. And I'd embark down that road hard. So I'd want to go deep into the markets that I've intended to serve, and then I'd want to go wide as it relates to other adjacent markets that could allow me to stimulate growth in places that I hadn't had the opportunity to do so before I got the funding.
Wow.
And I just wanted to point out that when Dave talks about adjacent markets, he's using our definition of that, I believe, which is, the same job executor getting additional jobs done, or some other job executor getting the same job done, right? Because you've already built your capabilities along each of those dimensions. You have the marketing arm to go to the client, you have the technology to go to the client. And so you're leveraging your capability by defining it in that manner. I think
Yeah.
that's a unique aspect to the way we think about this.
I
Yeah,
agree.
Tony,
And you always say it better than I do. So
yeah, Tony, I was gonna prompt you. He nailed the growing from the core into adjacent markets. That is a webinar we've done recently, on that approach. So that was unscripted, unprompted, supporting our point of view there, Dave.
and I didn't see, and I wasn't on that webinar, so I didn't see that. So
There, there you go. Tony, do you want to add any additional thoughts to, as leaders are thinking about growing from the core, the steps they should think about, or the questions they should think about answering?
Yeah, well, I think the very first thing is don't assume you can't grow from the core. Right. So a lot of in a lot of cases, companies think that they have to get into Horizon 2, Horizon 3, or they have to get out of their comfort zone. They have to get into new markets. That's risky, right? Especially for PE firms taking over a company, right? They should go for the more sure things, right? If there's such a thing, and that is to go after the adjacencies as we described. But before they even do that, ask the question: are we getting the entire job done for our current customer base? And we see the answer to that question in most cases is no. Customers are cobbling together solutions to get the entire job done, and we're offering solutions that get part of the job done. There's a mismatch, right? And Dave, it sounds like that's what you learned over time too, as you developed your methodology internally. That hey, there's more to the job. Let's get more of the job done. It's just a
Yeah.
natural extension.
Absolutely. There were so many times where we would go in and do a quality of earnings report and drop that report on the desk and run out and go do the next one and didn't even think about what happened after and what happened next to that, right? So, once the deal did close, how are they going to, identify and capture synergies in in an add-on acquisition? How are they going to rationalize costs and rationalize management, and who's going to do all that work for them? How are they going to build an infrastructure to support that operating model? And we just wouldn't even think about it. It just walked away, right?
Yeah.
And so just understanding what all else was happening as that transaction transpired was a big opportunity for us to just continue to grow right from the core.
Yeah. Great example.
I love that. I think it might be time that we dust off that growing from the core webinar, Tony. It's been a while. We should probably bring that one back up, and maybe we'll bring you on as a guest again, Dave.
Perfect.
This question comes from Martin. First of all, he said, "Great talk. Thank you for your insights. I understand you use the ODI insights to create service products that you delivered to your PE firm clients. I understand that this differentiated you from your competition. Would you say that ODI helps to frame/create dedicated products in service companies?" I can repeat that too if you want a second.
No, I think yeah, I mean, I think I got it. I mean, I think, one of the first exercises I went through was to go through and make sure that people understood the difference between table stakes and differentiation, right? I mean, and really it's a matter of, because I asked an auditor one time, I said, what makes you different? He says, oh, we've got a great process, and we've got, industry, focused talent, and we've got, our outputs are, second to none. We bring tremendous industry insight and all that kind of stuff. So, well, what do you think, your competitors are saying around, around their differentiation? And I said, he said, well, probably the same thing. And I said, well, but if you look at it in total, and you can bring, while you're doing that audit work, you can bring management consulting and CFO services and AI applications and RPA and things that are really generating true value in an asset. That's different, right? And we're not approaching it as one product or services. We're approaching it as a framework for delivering value, and it changed the game. So yeah, I mean, I think we did create. A lot of people thought M&A 360 was a product, and it really wasn't. It was a framework that contained a whole lot of products and services that delivered the value that M&A 360 articulated. So, I mean, I think we created that differentiation, and I think we did create a product set, right, that was not, it wasn't just ERP or CRM, or it wasn't just, opening balance sheets and, working capital analysis. It was a true, kind of either CFO or CIO services, product that delivered a value for setting up that function in a transaction. So yeah, I think we've done that.
Beautiful. All right, thank you for the question, Martin. This next question comes from Amit. So, did you go into value-based pricing arrangements with PE, as in M&A as a service, since you mapped all the jobs to be done by PE operating and deal teams?
Yeah, no, we didn't, and couldn't. So as a public accounting firm, SEC, all that kind of stuff, we couldn't do value-based pricing. So we did a lot of value-based selling and a lot of creative ways to make sure that our clients understood what they were getting for the price that they were paying. But I couldn't do any contingency type work or any value-based pricing. I was restricted from that.
Okay, great insight there. This next question comes from Gupta. This is, you had several roles in the process. How did you handle each role? More specifically, did you create a job map that included all the roles, or did each role have its own job map?
Um, I created a job map that had all the roles. So I'll give you an example. So we had a carve out solution. And if you think about a carve out, you're taking a division of a business and you're standing it up on its own, and there were 17 different individual work streams that had to be, conducted to pull that out and get it stood up, whether it's, setting up, again, opening balance sheet, you're setting up all the financial operations, revenue operations, IT infrastructure, you know, technical accounting services, tax, or I mean, all that had to be wrapped together and it had to be orchestrated. So we created a carve out job. I mean, I actually I wrote a job sentence for using the ODI construct. So this is what a carve out is in one sentence. And I just wrapped all of the discrete products teams around that definition, and we build it out that way.
Great. Tony, do you want to add any thoughts on, you know, how creating that job map through these roles can help an organization, understand what they need to accomplish?
Yeah, sure. Because, some people get confused. They think, job maps are about somebody's actual job. That's not the case, right? As Dave pointed out, there's a job like the carve out, right? There's a beginning and an end to that process. So that's the job. You're trying to carve it out, stand it up on its own. Um, Mapping out that entire job is the way to go, right? Because you got to get every step in the job done. Then you can, if you're trying to prioritize which needs are unmet, that adds a wrinkle because you have different groups of people prioritizing different parts of the workflow. So that adds a challenge to what you got to do. But it's still, the way to approach it.
Great. Another follow-up question related to the job map and the job seems to be a popular topic. So when mapping the PE firm's job, grow the value of the asset, where did you typically see the biggest blind spots? This question comes from Brad.
The biggest blind spot. Um, I would say, yeah, I'd have to say the biggest blind spot would have been in the ability for the management team to culturally adapt to the level of sophistication and the speed at which private equity moved. Um, I, I mean, I saw so many deals where, very, very solid management team ran the business to a certain point and then, sold to private equity and just couldn't handle the rigor that was required from a reporting performance. I mean, just the whole, again, the pace at which you have to move to get something from beginning to end in 3 to 5 to 7 years. It's just different than running a going concern. And I think that was one that always seemed to create some interesting challenges and some business disruption as a result.
Interesting. All right. One more question here. So how did you gain support from the PE teams to get a definition of their job to be done? You had a service provider view, but how did you get a practitioner input? Would love to see any of these samples for an operating partner focusing on value creation.
So I guess didn't understand that question. Are you asking how did I get the internal teams to rally around the value creation aspect of what we're trying to get done, or is this more toward the operating partner itself?
I think this is when you were creating the definition of the job to be done. How did you gain support from the teams on what that definition would be? Did you get practitioner input? Did you get the client input, et cetera?
I, oh, But well, both. First of all, I always started with the client input. I mean, M&A 360 was not built in a vacuum. That was built with input from clients I had served for 5, 10 years, right? And how they would likely view and consume that kind of a message. The internal side of it, it was always I had to get everybody's DNA on those job statements. They had to be a part of the authoring process, or they wouldn't. I couldn't just feed it to them, right? And say, hey, this is the way we're going to go about it. They had to have some level of authorship and ownership of the statement of the whole message. Had to. The only way it worked.
Yeah, I think that's one of the trends that we're seeing right now that's becoming very clear, especially with AI. A lot of businesses are turning to AI and asking them customer related questions about their customer base, and you just can't replace talking to actual customers. You
No.
got that's you have to talk to actual customers. I don't
Yeah.
think that'll ever be replaced.
I don't think so either. I don't know how I could ever. I mean, otherwise you're just building it in the dark. If you don't really take the time to listen and understand and play it back to them in a way that they can get it and they validate it, I don't see how you ever make it happen.
Yeah. And I think, Tony, what makes jobs to be done and outcome-driven innovation so powerful is gives you a framework to uh, deconstruct and truly understand what the customer is trying to accomplish, right? You get past all those, all the solutions they're thinking of, and getting straight to the core problems that they're trying to solve, and allowing the team to focus on that core outcome.
Yeah. Solution independent, stable over time. And just like in Dave's case, growing the value of an asset over time, that's been the job of the PE firm since there's been PE firms,
Yeah.
right? So nothing new there, right? But understanding all the steps that they got to go through to get that bigger job done and not to find the job so narrowly, like due diligence or do the quality of earnings report. Yeah, those are pieces of the bigger job. But and recognizing
Exactly.
that they're pieces and not the job in and of itself is really key.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. This next question comes from Usido. When applying ODI principles to private equity, we're dealing with what appears to be a two-sided market. From the PE perspective, the market could be defined as company owners plus the job of growing company value. And from the company's perspective, the market is PE firms and the job of generating returns for their investors. Each side is simultaneously the job executor and the customer to the other. How does this two-sided market dynamic affect how PE firms should apply ODI in their due diligence process when testing alpha potential? Should they focus on understanding both jobs simultaneously or prioritize one perspective over the other? This is a graduate level question here.
Yeah, I was going to say whoever asked that has I'm going to lower the average IQ here on that one. I boy, I my gut. I mean, I guess I'm just going to give you my gut feel. My gut answer is I think you have to apply it on both sides, and I think you're looking at it from a bit of a different angle, but they're so heavily entwined and complementary um, that I would think you'd want to approach it both sides against the middle. That's probably a pretty remedial answer to a very sophisticated question, but yeah.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier to say, hey, the company itself could apply ODI to figure out its growth plan and then pitch it to the PE firm and say, here's why we're worth, more than you might think we're worth, right?
Yeah.
So if they had that in their hands, they could leverage it to increase the value of their asset before it's acquired, right? If they wait till after it's acquired, then it's the PE firm who's investing in the insight to grow the firm from the core, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's a two-sided market. It seems like if it depends on which party's going to do what at what time, right? If the company itself wants to take the lead, like OnTrack did, and built out their roadmap and made their asset worth more to the buyer, that's great. But once it's bought, then it's the same job, right? Of any PE firm trying to grow the asset that they just purchased.
Yep. And there should be full alignment on that growth thesis with the management team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's a quick follow-up question related to that, Dave. If I'm the owner of a business and I'm being approached by PE firms, part of the equation is if I'm the owner, I'm trying to have the highest amount of valuation, giving up the least amount of equity, right? Right?
Yeah.
And so if that's my goal, wouldn't ODI be a strategic asset to helping you to help you painting the higher valuation of the firm? Because you're able to clearly demonstrate the market size and how your product is achieving and addressing those underserved
Yeah.
outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably a bit of a stretch. I mean, at the end of the day, I haven't seen a replacement, for a multiple of EBITDA, right? And at the end of the day, you can sit here and throw all kinds of things um, at valuation, right? That may or may not be tangible. At the end of the day, I think that most, if most iBankers, most PE firms are all going to look at EBITDA as kind of the guidepost. Yes, the value gets put on, you know, uh, recurring revenue models, and a value that gets put on, customer churn and year over year growth and that kind of thing. But the big, determining factor is a multiple of EBITDA.
Okay. So, uh, all right. Thank you for that answer then. Well, one last question. I think we have time for one more. This one is just a response to our conversation around the importance of speaking to customers. And this one comes from Philip. So, for Tony, what is your take on qual interviews ever being replaced by AI and AI versus AI interviews? This
Yeah.
topic just comes up in some way or fashion in every
Yeah.
single webinar session we do.
Yeah. Well, it's a great topic because you wonder, customer interviews seem like they'd be a great fit for the language model. And we try to model this out too. Maybe someday AI could take the place, but there's a long road ahead. So as we test this out now, we can get good accuracy on creating a job statement through AI if we plug in the right prompts. We'll get about 85, 90% accuracy, which is pretty good. For the job map, it drops down to about 70% accuracy, but at least it's heading you, gives you a starting point. And to get to the outcomes, we're down to 30, 40% level. It's not very good yet. So for now, at least, our team members use AI as a way to gain initial insight into a market. So we have our tools to do that, but it can't take the place of the customer interview. Like even if you had some inputs, you still got to go out to customers and say, "Is this real?" Right? And we haven't had any companies come to us so far and say, "Hey, it's okay that you don't talk to any customers. We'll be fine with the AI version of the input." That's never happened. But we've had the opposite happen, where they say, this is going to include real customer interviews. This is not just AI-based stuff, right? And so, I think we're at a point in time where it's good. It's getting better. I think AI is a disruptive technology, but there's still a way to go. It's still getting the job done. It's great for non-consumers, right? If you follow Christensen's model, it's great for non-consumers, people who didn't have the skill or the money to do research before. Now they can get the job done worse than you know the current methods, but a lot better than what they could have done before. I think there's some value in that for those folks who couldn't participate in that market. But the question remains, is AI a disruptive technology, and can each iteration of the product get the job done better and better and better? Just because you have a technology doesn't mean it's a disruptive technology. Like you got to be able to build on that technology to eventually get the job done better and cheaper, right? That's the old dominant strategy play that we talk about. That remains to be seen. I would predict it's heading in that direction, but I don't know how fast it'll be before we get there.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Dave. Um, Dave, thank you for your time today. Very much appreciated for sharing your experience and wisdom. Uh, do you have any last comments or thoughts for the audience? Anything you want to share?
I'd probably just restate, I think that this approach, it just works, and the concepts are common sense, and they make sense, and if applied appropriately, they can deliver some significant results. But um, execution is difficult, and it takes commitment and follow through and consistency to deliver it all the way through. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Tony, any last thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, first I want to thank Dave for doing this today. It was excellent. I love hearing the story. It's a great success, and I hope in in your retirement here, Dave, that you can create another $500 million company.
I'm working on it. I'm
You're
working on it.
working on it. Excellent. And thanks to the audience for being here and their interest in the topic and for the great questions. It just strengthens our joint understanding of the framework and how it can be applied. So I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you.